Hi, this is Teddy, and you're listening to Ian Todd in Minnesota on Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network.
Are you listening?
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I am on today with Ian Todd, who's a returning guest. And Ian is running for Congress this year in the Minnesota 6th District. Hi, Ian.
Hey, Kelly.
How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, and thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, so we last talked to you in 2018 when you were running for this same seat, and now you're running again for the 2020 election. But, you know, just in case people don't remember, can you just tell us a little bit of background about you and why you're running for Congress?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a progressive millennial veteran. I served in the Air Force for 6 years as a geospatial intelligence analyst. A lot of the reasons why I've decided to jump into the world of politics is because of the 6 years of service that I had. A lot of it has to do with what we did as a geospatial intelligence analyst. That's essentially the drone program. And a lot of what I saw and a lot of misgivings about the way the United States operates in the rest of the world. Those decisions are made on a federal level, and so that's the office that I decided to run for. I run on policies. That's my big thing, and my big three policies in 2018 and again in 2020 is getting money out of politics, doing something about climate change, and securing Medicare for all. Because I just think that these are the most important things moving forward for us to deal with the corruption, because that is just so pervasive in Washington. People see this. I don't really talk to anyone who doesn't understand that it is problematic that people are getting paid to make decisions. Climate change, of course, it's the number one national security concern, and it really does need the kind of funding backing it that other national security concerns get in our country. And I want to see that investment. I want to see it through Green New Deal policies to actually galvanize our ability, our infrastructure, and create this green energy system using the money that we clearly have, because we have a truly colossal amount right now sitting in the military budget. And then, of course, we need a healthcare system that doesn't leave people behind. We still have entirely too many people in our country that are uninsured. And then insured people still don't go to the hospital because it is too expensive. And that is very much a problem, especially in the context of, you know, possibly having a very serious disease, going through our country right now, especially when CDC has been stripped of funds, and not just during this administration, but for several generations in a row. We just have not been funding the CDC and other programs like that anywhere near as much as we should be.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the district, and then we can come back to some of these issues. So people think of Minnesota as a kind of blue place now, but this is a district with a Republican incumbent, and in fact is Michelle Bachmann's prior district. Talk to me some about the 6th district, sort of where in Minnesota this is, and what you learned running for office in 2018 that you're able to use this time.
Absolutely. So it's central Minnesota. I actually live right outside of St. Cloud in Sauk Rapids. And that's it. If you know where that is in Minnesota, then you probably know Minnesota decently well. But it's the area north and west of the Twin Cities. Is a good way of saying it. So a lot of rural areas, a lot of farmland. It's a decently large district, though not the largest in Minnesota, not by a long shot. But it still takes an hour and a half to drive from end to end. And it does stretch quite a way, and it's gerrymandered in a very fascinating way. I like to say that it looks like a lobster. But the district itself has some large concentrations because it does of people, because it does have some of the suburbs of the Twin Cities. A lot of our support does exist there, and a lot of our support exists here in St. Cloud, which is the biggest city within CD6.
So are you seeing this time around the same level of interest in politics? Are people more interested? What's the reaction to people as you're talking to them about this election? Are they thinking about Congress? Is everyone just thinking about the presidential election? What are you hearing from people?
See, that's a great distinction, because certainly people are more excited, but there's mostly excitement surrounding the presidential race right now. Excitement, misgivings. We'll see what happens with this. I hope it doesn't divide us. I think that is so important that we stay together regardless of what happens, even if it is something that not a lot of us are very comfortable with, because we do need to all stay together. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm this, below the most important part of the ticket in most people's minds, trying to get people to also have their excitement about the level right below. So for me, that's just, during door knocks and phone calls, make sure that we kind of tie this to the issues that we care about, and talk about what will be possible whenever we get a new president if we also have a new progressive Congress to go along with it.
And I know in Minnesota, there's a possibility of flipping the state legislature this year as well. Is that something that is getting attention? And are you working in concert at all with state legislative candidates?
Yeah, we reach out with a whole lot of them, especially during this period of time, which is caucuses. So we just have precinct caucuses, and now we'll have conventions coming up, the Senate districts and then the congressional level, because it's fun here in Minnesota. We like to keep it complicated. So during these events, we actually get to meet up, speak a whole lot. So many of the people who are running are the same folks who ran in 2018, and so I formed a lot of good relationships with them then. And then a lot of new people are running, and we're reaching out and speaking with them. Here in CD6, we don't have a lot of representatives that are in the state house either. So it's very important for all of us within the DFL, Democratic Farmer Labor Party, because, again, Minnesota likes to keep it complicated. It is kind of that joint effort as much as it can be, because there's also separations when it comes to how you can fundraise and how much your staff can work together. But we still like to collaborate when we can, especially when it comes to getting volunteers to be excited about both levels.
Yeah, and I think, that's something we've been sort of hammering home on this podcast a lot, is that, if getting more turnout down ballot helps up ballot and vice versa. And, we need to do all of these things at the same time and not worry about just one or the other.
Especially in rural areas like this, because that's where grassroots power comes from. It is about people getting very excited. And that is a really interesting thing about CD6. We have lost pretty bad on a congressional level for a number of years in a row. But with the same district lines, this district has also come within 1 point of swinging blue. But we tend to forget about that because we've had some bad numbers.
So you mentioned that you are very progressive. There's this sort of ongoing debate, I guess, in the Democratic Party widely about, how do we win in districts like this? Do we win with a progressive message? Do we win with a more moderate message? We could talk about whether that's actually the distinction that everyone thinks it is. But, what do you see as you're talking to people? Does the progressive message, does that ring true for them? Are they excited about it? Why is that the way that you choose to run in this district?
Well, I mean, the big reason why I choose to run that way in this district is because that's the policies that I believe in. But the reason why I think that it works is because I think the big drawback is that there's oftentimes this idea that you want to run somebody who's Republican light. that you're essentially trying to send somebody who says a lot of things that the Republican does, but has at least some things that agree with the Democratic Party. And I think that fundamentally weakens the base, because a lot of Democrats will simply not vote for that. We have the habit of staying home when we don't like the candidate that's put forward by our party. You definitely saw that in 2016, but I think you see that in local areas all the time. The Democrats stay home when Republicans are much better at staying in lockstep with each other, even if they do not support their candidate, because they support the party in a way that Democrats don't. So I think, especially in a rural area like this, there's a lot of people who don't consider themselves Democrats, but would never consider themselves a Republican either. And when it comes down to it, they do have more left-leaning ideas, especially when it comes to what can we do about what's going on with income inequality in our country, because that ends up being a big focus of the people who feel disenfranchised by the parties, because they feel like the economy is not working for them anymore, even if it does seem to be doing better. Or if unemployment is down, it doesn't matter to them because they're still making just a little bit above minimum wage. That is so common throughout my district. And reaching out to those people who do feel very disenfranchised by both parties, yeah, that's an incredibly powerful way to build up power for a party that has waned in an area, because clearly people have chosen to stay home. I have to ask the question, why? And what is going to make young voters come back into the party? And it's concerns about climate change. It's concerns about income inequality. It's concerns about not being able to afford going to the doctor, or concerns about what all this money in politics means. So it's what I run on, and it's what I've gotten positive responses from just so many different people in the district, including some folks who identify as Republican. So I just think that this is the policy that connects the most amount of people, even if it's oftentimes considered far left. I just don't think that's accurate.
Yeah, I somewhere in my brain, I have a thesis about how I don't think it's the left-right divide, but work that out on another time.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the importance of the environment and climate. You were endorsed by the DFL Environmental Caucus. So talk to me some about what that would look like, what practically you would like to see Congress doing to fight climate change, and what that would mean in particular for your district.
Oh, goodness. Well, I think the most important thing that we can do is give it the proper infrastructure spending, and understand that that's essentially what we're doing, because we are building a new infrastructure and it needs that kind of spending behind it. We need the green energy infrastructure that we can essentially sell to the rest of the world. We need to be generating it through more investment in science and technology. We need to take this every bit as seriously as we took the space race. Because quite frankly, it's more important to make sure that we can actually figure out how do we live on this world without also destroying it, while simultaneously keeping the amenities that we want, because I don't want to take all of those away, but I do want to lessen our reliance on it, lessen how much energy we use where we can, especially in industry, and we're finding out amazing ways that we can. And I think that we need to mandate some of what we've learned through, especially using algorithms to find out how you can have energy savings. That's something that needs to happen. And of course, we need to switch more to solar and wind power. Whenever we do this, we're building up an economy, because people are going to have jobs to do these things. People are going to have jobs installing these things. Our energy grid needs to be almost completely revamped. All of our cables essentially do need to be replaced, and we also need to build in energy storage into the system, which is something that it's lacking right now, that can be incredibly difficult, because you always need to make sure your energy input is the same as energy output. That's not an easy thing for anyone to do. Building in those kinds of redundancies and allowing us to store energy makes solar and wind possible. but it also makes for a much safer energy grid. And then we need to sell this kind of technology to the rest of the world, which is essentially what we did after the space race as well, and it behooved us very much to have that kind of powerful economy. Right now, we're losing to China. We're allowing other countries to build the solutions, and essentially we will be the ones to buy those in due time unless we start putting in more money into developing our own.
Yeah, well, and, clearly we have to do something, and soon.
But yes, that's why I enjoy the Green New Deal legislation, the idea of actually funding this properly.
Yeah, definitely. So last time you ran in 2018, you didn't have a primary challenger, and this time you do, and I think sometimes people think of primaries as a bad thing, that we're focusing on the wrong things. But, I like to think of primaries as more a chance for everyone to refine their ideas and really shape their race. How has the primary been working out for you? What is it like this time to have a primary challenger, unlike last time?
I actually love it. And to be fair, I kind of did have a primary challenger last time. It was just a much later arrival. So, and this really is something that you have to build up over time. So, yeah, Tanya's actually been running since last year. So this is a very different experience, certainly. And I think that it's overwhelmingly positive because we're reaching out in different ways. So she has an audience that isn't the same audience that I built in 2018. She has more people coming into the fold, and that is so important because regardless of which one of us wins, then a lot of that will combine because these people will still be focused on these battles. For Tanya, it's not about defeating me. It's about defeating Tom Emmer. For me, it's not about defeating her. It's about defeating Tom Emmer. And the way that we've been presenting ourselves, the way that we've had debates is actually just really about policy. Try to keep the personal out of this, and we try our best to stay friendly with each other. Obviously, we're both people who care enough to do this, and this is a lot. It really is. So I appreciate anyone who's willing to step forward, and I appreciate the fact that more people are paying attention to CD6 because of it. And all the rest of it just spurs us both to work a little bit harder, right?
Yeah, I wish we could all think of the presidential primary in those positive terms.
Oh, goodness. I think that we really should learn to. Because I'm a big supporter of Bernie Sanders, but I don't like the toxicity that exists towards the Bernie camp and is also coming from the Bernie camp. Mm-hmm. It's very frustrating to see that because you have the candidate that you love, and every candidate that you love will also have people that also love that candidate that just say some pretty terrible things.
Well, hopefully we can all learn from this experience this year.
Yes. Oh, well, I mean, we'll see if we'll ever learn. I think I take solace not in thinking that this will ever go away, but understanding that this aspect of it, at very least, is as old as time. And this isn't new. This isn't something that's going to destroy our society, but it's probably not going anywhere. We've been doing this since the birth of our country.
Yeah. So tell our listeners how they can help out with your campaign.
Well, some of the best ways they can is just to engage more on social media, especially if you're far and wide. Of course, you can donate. You can go to iantoddforcongress.com. You can check out my Twitter. That's Todd for MN. And then you can also follow me on Facebook, which is probably we are the most active. And that's Ian Todd for Congress. Yeah, those are the best ways. Reach out and engage.
All right. Excellent. I think this is going to be a very busy political year. So I commend you for running for office again, for taking on that challenge. And I really wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
All right. Well, Ian, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. And you guys have a really late primary, right? It's in August?
Yes, but more than likely this will all be over by May 9th. That's the convention because of us being a caucus state and being different. Complicated.
Yeah. So Minnesota is super confusing. You've got the presidential primary, and that's different than the caucuses, and that's different than the primary.
Well, and it is my primary, though. It's just if we do go to the primary, that means that somebody didn't abide by the endorsement on May 9th. Okay. I think we both plan to abide by endorsement. I do, and I believe Tanya does as well.
Okay. All right. Well, we will all keep an eye on that and see what happens. So thanks for joining me, and good luck.
All right. Take care, Kelly.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.